Right, so who's sick and tired of hearing Labour refuse to commit to anything right now on the basis that we've got no money left, we can't afford this, that, or the other, Tories have trashed the country, and Rachel Reeves bleating about her fiscal rules as being the reason why Labour can't commit to spending money on a single thing at all. It can't just be me, surely. All it does is give Starmer and Co the excuse to not find any policy positions to stick to because he's got a well-earned reputation for breaking his promises, as we know anyway. And if he can say, well, we'll have to look at how things go, we'll do what we can if we reach power based on our fiscal rules, we'll see what things are looking like, but it's not looking promising. He can continue to benefit from the anti-Tory vote without telling anyone what he would actually do in power. Likely nothing different from what the Tories are doing now, based on how he's behaving now. The fiscal rules excuses got very old, very fast, because we know Starmer and Reeves have just made them up. They aren't based on any concrete evidence. They aren't based on economic competence. They are totally arbitrary and meaningless, amounting to, according to Reeves, that day-to-day spending will be paid for via general taxation and getting the debt down. That is all they consist of. So all the times they hide behind it, that's really all she's talking about. So there's a lot of nonsense being spoken, really. Taxation pays for nothing, after all. It's a control on inflation that lets government print to spend. And getting what debt down? National debt, presumably? Well, that's money we owe ourselves, isn't it? So it isn't really a debt, just a financial mechanism that nations that control their own currency have that we as households do not. So it's nonsense. Reeves might as well have said monopoly money is the new UK currency, we'll build houses with that. It would make just as much sense. But Reeves has been called out for it now, so often has that line been used, and she's been called out by none other than one of her own economics advisors. Jim O'Neill, Baron O'Neill of Gatley, yes, he's in the Lords, former head of economic research at Goldman Sachs, banker, put into the Lords by Theresa May as a Tory peer. Tory peer? He was formerly a commercial economics advisor to David Cameron even, but has since left the Tories and now sits as a crossbencher. So we have a situation right now where a former Tory advisor to a former Tory government put in the Lords by the Tories is advising a wannabe Labour chancellor on economics, and he's actually calling her out, along with his former party on economics, it has to be said, for talking twaddle about these fiscal rules. It's not so much who is the right-winger, but who is more right-wing these days between both main parties on different economic issues. It's just beggars belief, really. Anyway, he's come out and said both Labour and the Tories need to ditch petty and arbitrary fiscal rules, which are holding back growth. I mean, for God's sake, we're now in the position where a former Tory Lord is now talking more economic sense than an incoming potential Labour government is. A Labour government that's now talking like the Tories before they're even elected. Now, growth is obviously finite. You can't keep growing infinitely on a finite planet. But with our economy down the pan right now under the Tories, and with Labour playing follow my leader behind all of these policies, frankly, anyone, I suppose, these days is capable of making more economic sense than either main party is. So what has he said needs to happen? Because actually he does make some valid points here. And it's a bit telling that he's saying all this now when he must have known it before and was clearly advocating for different things. If he was advising David Cameron, he must have been into austerity at some point, surely. But anyway, this is where he is today, and this is where he's taken it to Rachel Reeves. The UK needs to raise investment in both the public and private sectors if it was to return to strong growth, he says. Let's set the term growth aside. Let's say productivity instead, because that's a more sensible word to use. Public sector particularly, he says. So let's take the NHS as one obvious example of that. Long waiting lists, lack of investment, lack of staff. People get sick or need operations, they're waiting longer, so they're out of the workforce longer. So that has a knock-on negative economic effect. We can all understand that and follow that. So investing in the NHS also happens to have what's called an economic multiplier effect. An economic multiplier being something you can invest money in and you get a greater return out of because of how it benefits society. Now, according to a TUC study, for every pound put into the NHS, the government gets a tax return via this multiplier effect of some £3.60 from the economy. Economic growth from the NHS itself, in effect. To this end, O'Neill has advocated for reform of the Office for Budget Responsibility. Now, the OBR, we've all heard of them. They pop up on the news periodically, don't they? Usually when we're talking about inflation and interest rates and stuff like that, invariably making forecasts about growth, predicting rises and falls, where the economy is doing well or not, talking about the budget. But O'Neill wants to see them given new powers to look at the public sector across the board and identify where these economic multipliers are, where best the government could target investment in them to maximise an economic return from them, whilst at the same time get those services up and running and working again as they should and as they need to. I mean, it's almost like he's suggesting privatisation would need to stop and the services be run for the greater good. So no wonder Reeves isn't listening to him, in which case, and no wonder he's taking it to his former party as well. O'Neill's beef with Reeves's messaging and the Tory mantras she's just copying, basically. No surprise when she's also gone to George Osborne for advice on becoming a chancellor. And that is that this economic policy of hers is fixated on trying to balance budgets. I mean, the Tories are the same. Balanced budgets, like the national debt, that don't need to be balanced at all, and running away from investing government money in the things that will actually provide economic growth. I mean, think about it. If the OBR find public sector areas that give a larger return on the money put in, then investing in them cannot possibly violate any spending restraints because they're always going to pay for themselves. So why not fix those services and get a return from it? Why not say that? Why not come out with that as a policy, Starmer and Reeves? Who's the more afraid of making spending commitments here? Which one of you is it? Because it just seems like you're too afraid to do anything different than the Tories are in case you get criticised for it, and in case it loses you some of this precious right-wing support that you've been chasing, that you've been securing as people decide to pick you over the Tories for the sake of them for the sake of you not being the Tories right now. The red Tories rather than the blue Tories. It is truly depressing that a former Tory life peer is making more economic sense than Labour is. And they're supposedly listening to him as an advisor. But the fact he's gone to the papers to get his points made public says a lot about how much notice is being taken of him, surely. The Tories themselves in government have overseen 13 years of stagnation, of pathetic growth as they implemented austerity and have never looked back. Reeves seems absolutely hell-bent on doing exactly the same, but then should she become Chancellor, we'll have only swapped one set of Tories for another. So really, why should we be surprised they don't turn out to be any different in the end? And the same rotten politics poisoning our lives now, and have been for over a decade now, will just continue under Team Keith. And frankly, if this chap O'Neill left the Tories because he couldn't stand what they were standing for, I can't see him sticking with Labour much longer either. Reeves is sticking to her line that her fiscal rules are non-negotiable, ironclad. She's a red Tory idiot, and so it'll prove if Labour wins the next election, when nothing economically changes and we'll still stagnate and still barely see any economic growth and any benefit in any of the services we all rely on. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this video useful. Please like, share and subscribe if you did. More content out daily. Meanwhile, here's a video recommendation where more of Reeves' right-wing favouritism is on show, along with a selective ditching of those ironclad fiscal rules as she announces Labour will come to save the buy-to-let landlords. Well, how are you paying for that then? Well, I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.